Welcome to Project Blue. My name's Matt, and today's video is a commander deck tech for Kresh the Bloodbraided. This 3-colored Jund deck is a strong, enjoyable, and interactive deck with a fun twist. Kresh the Bloodbraided was known as the mightiest warrior on the Shard plane of Jund. The warriors of the Jund plane wore braids in their hair, tied using the pieces of their fallen enemies. While it was not uncommon for a Jund warrior to have 2 to 5 braids in their hair, Kresh had an impressive 22. Kresh the Bloodbraided is a 5-mana creature, casting for 2 colorless, a black, a red, and a green. He is a human warrior, originally printed in the first set of the Alara block, Shards of Alara, in the fall of 2008. This iconic block was built around the 3-color groupings that combine 2 allied colors with their common enemy color, known as a shard. Kresh the Bloodbraided comes from the shard known as Jund, the shard of red, black, and green. In a mixture of flavor and function, Kresh's ability epitomizes his and his people's history and culture. As Kresh's, and by extension your, enemies' creatures and your own creatures die, their power makes Kresh stronger, giving Kresh +1 counters to his power and toughness equal to the dead creature's power. While this 3 power, 3 toughness mythic creature for 5 mana might not seem to be the most powerful stats, Kresh is one warrior you don't want to be on the bad side of. Let's look at what makes Kresh so strong. Kresh's strength comes from the creatures that die around him. So let's start off by looking at some of the creatures in this deck. One way of getting Kresh bigger is by having lots of bodies fall around him. So we kick it off by populating the board with token creatures ready to die for Kresh. Talani Summoner is a nice 1/1 for 2 mana that can pump out 1/1 red elemental tokens when it attacks. While being forced to exile them at the next end step won't pump our commander, if we get 10 permanents, the city's blessing, we can keep them around. Remember, in the commander format, getting 10 permanents out is one of the easier feats to accomplish. Next, Varchild, Betrayer of Keldor, isn't like the other token makers on this list, where she doesn't make tokens for you, per se, but for your opponents when she deals them damage. The upside here is that these survivors can't attack you or your planeswalker, and when Varchild leaves the battlefield, you get all those survivors. Up next is Huntmaster of the Fells. This 2/2 for 4 mana gives us a 2/2 green wolf token when it enters the battlefield, and again when it transforms. Creekwood Liege gives all of our black creatures and all of our green creatures a boost, while also giving us a black-green worm on our upkeep. It's nice that Kresh is both black and green, so it gets both of Creekwood Liege's buffs. The final token generating creature we have here is Wasitora, Nekoru Queen. First off, it's a flying, trampling 5/4 cat dragon, and if that wasn't enough, when it connects with an opponent, they have to sacrifice a creature. If they can't do that, we get a 3/3 cat dragon. It's a cat dragon. So either way, they're pumping up Kresh or giving us more board fodder. Any way you look at it, it's a win-win. With so many tokens and so much death going on, it's nice to have an upside to all the carnage. Blood Artist is a great card for what we have going on here. Whenever any creature dies, including itself, someone at the table loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Harvester of Souls is another great Death Matters card, where, whenever another non-token creature dies, you can draw a card. A nice bit of card advantage to go with a side of Carnage. What's great about both of these creatures is that it doesn't matter whose creature dies, ours or our opponent's. Either way, they will trigger. Now that we have a few upsides to the death going on, and a good amount of tokens, we need a few creatures that can help us make sure other creatures die. Sacrifice outlets and effects on creatures is a great way to ensure mass carnage. Fleshbag Marauder is a nice, forced, symmetric sacrifice effect that not only hits everyone at the table, but can be sacrificed to its own ability. When this hits the field, it's guaranteed to give Kresh at least another 3/3 boost. Vampire Aristocrat and Fallen Angel are 2 more free sack outlets that pump themselves every time you sack a creature to them. What's great here is that while you're sacrificing creatures to make Vampire Aristocrat and Fallen Angel bigger, you're also making Kresh bigger, getting him ready for the kill. The final creature sack outlet we have here is the Black God from Amonkhet, Bantu the Glorified. This menacing, indestructible 4/6 for 3 mana is not only a free sack outlet costing 1 and a black, but it gives us a scry among other upsides. The downside to this god is that it can't attack or block unless another one of our creatures had died the same turn. But with so many other sack outlets, it's not that hard to turn this god on. Sometimes you just have to ask yourself what's better than beating your opponents with your creatures. Beating them with their own, of course. When Conquering Manticore and Morton Primordial enter the battlefield, they allow you to gain control of your opponent's creatures, with the Manticore targeting only one of your one opponent's creatures, while Molten Primordial allows you to grab one creature from each opponent. Captivating Crew allows you to pay 4 mana to take a creature from an opponent and do it at sorcery speed as many times as your mana will allow. Kresh doesn't always want or need small tokens and creatures. Sometimes Kresh needs something with some size. Here we have a few really big creatures that help get the damage through. While Pathbreaker Ibex isn't really that big of a creature on its own, when it attacks, it gives a buff to all of our other creatures equal to the largest creature we control. The trample it gives everything as well doesn't hurt either. Phytotitan has to be my favorite creature to sacrifice and pump Kresh within this deck because it keeps coming back, giving you a consistent creature to sacrifice. Finally, Ghalta, Primal Hunger, is a huge trampling 12/12 that with enough power on the board comes out dirt cheap. The last group of creatures in this deck are a few utility creatures that really help round out the deck. Sakura Tribe Elder is an easy way to ramp out land and help turn on Bantu for free. Ronos the Indomitable is an indestructible death-touching god, and while you need another creature with power 4 or greater in order to use him, this deck does not make it too hard to get that. Eternal Witness allows you to get back anything you want from your graveyard to your hand. If your opponent is playing Rest in Peace or Solemnity, or has a Glacial Chasm out, Acidic Slime gets rid of it for you. The last creature in the deck gives you some height and a great way to remove a few things from an opponent's board. Steel Hellkite is a flying 5/5 for 6 mana with a helpful ability that allows you to pay X and then destroy all non-land permanents an opponent who is dealt damage by this Metal Dragon controls, with a converted mana cost of X. The only downside to this is that you can only do it once a turn. This deck likes to sacrifice creatures, whether it's our own or our opponents. Having consistent sacrifice outlets is crucial to making sure Kresh gets swole. This deck runs 3 artifact-based sack outlets. Ashnod's Altar is a 3-mana artifact that allows us to trade in creatures for 2 colorless mana. Next, Spawning Pit is a sacrifice outlet that gives us the ability to put out 1 2/2 spawn artifact creature token for every 2 creatures we sack into it. Lastly, Altar of Dementia is a fun little mill tool, where we have a target player mill their deck into their graveyard equal to the sacrifice creature's power. Their graveyard gets bigger while Kresh gets bigger. So much fun there. This deck is not the lowest CMC deck around, and as such, it runs a good number of mana rocks to help keep it going. Staples like Soul Ring and Thought Vessel are the only 2 colorless rocks in the deck. We also run 4 mana rocks that help us make sure we hit our colors whenever we need them, with the indestructible Darksteel Ingot, Commander Sphere, Cultivator's Caravan, which, along with being a mana rock, we can crew up and also beat face with, and finally Chromatic Lantern for the ultimate color fixing. The last 3 rocks we run here are the 3 signets this shard allows us: Golgari for black and green, Gruul for red and green, and Rakdos for black and red. Sack outlets and mana rocks only get us so far with this deck. There are games that require a little more utility. Sensei's Divining Top spins around this deck to help fix the draws and make sure we're hitting our land drops and creatures when we need them. With so much attacking going on, Sword of the Animus helps thin out basic lands from our deck, while giving the equipped creature a slight boost. We will get into some of the interesting lands that come in quite useful in a bit, but Expedition Map is quintessential to getting this deck to work. Kresh can get big, and with that size comes a target. Making sure he can't be targeted for removal with Swiftfoot Boots, adding hexproof on top of haste is quite helpful. Lastly, the way to win is by getting our large creatures, especially Kresh, through and dealing damage. Whisper Silk Cloak gives the equipped creature unblockable, meaning it attacks and gets through any line of defense. And the Shroud the Cloak gives also means the opponent can't just target it for removal in response. Enchantments overall aren't really a huge deal for this deck's game plan, so the 4 enchantments this deck does run are critical. Sylvan Library is an amazing 2-mana enchantment that allows us to draw 2 extra cards on our draw step, then choose whether or not we want to pay 4 life to keep those cards, or put them back on top for free. Attrition is a twofer. Not only is a sack outlet for pumping up Kresh, but it is also targeted removal for any non-black creature on the field. Our opponent has a huge flyer that is just going over our board. Well, for 1 black mana, we sack one of our creatures, Phyto-Titan for example, and blow up their bird, growing Kresh twice. This deck has the ability to go wide, along with its going big. An issue with that in Commander is that if you have a large creature or a large number of creatures on the board, they don't really stick around between the time they hit the board and the time they can attack. Fires of Yavimaya solves that problem for us by giving all of our creatures haste. The last enchantment we run here is Necropotence. While it does become a non-bow with Sylvan Library, forcing us to skip our draw step, it does ensure that we finish our turn with as many cards in our hand as we want, all at the cost of 1 life per card. The last non-land permanent this deck runs is 1 Planeswalker. Xenoghost the Reveler is a 4-mana, 3 loyalty Planeswalker from Theros that pumps out a 2/2 red-green Satyr token for 0 loyalty. If our board gets wide enough or we find ourselves in need of some extra mana, Xenoghost's +1 gives us any combination of red and green mana equal to the number of creatures we control. I have never needed to ultimate Xenoghost, as his 0 and plus are more helpful in almost every situation, but in that one situation that we need to pay 6 loyalty, we get to exile the top 7 cards of our library, then put all lands and all creatures from among them directly onto the battlefield. Moving into spells, Death is central to this deck, and as such, we run a huge suite of 11 removal spells, both targeted and mass removal. Getting the first one out of the way is not necessarily a creature removal, but more of a targeted artifact and enchantment removal with Naturalize. Terminate is a 2-mana, black and red targeted creature removal spell that gets around regeneration. One of my favorite ways to win the game is to pump Kresh huge and then fling him at an opponent. But along with being a nice sack outlet in a pinch, I can also hit an opponent's creature if not their face. Vicious Offering is a really nice way to clear out a creature with Indestructible by giving him -2/-2, or I can use it as an additional sack outlet and give that creature -5/-5. Putrefy is another targeted removal spell that gets around regeneration just like Terminate, but this black and green card can also hit artifacts. The last real targeted removal spell we are running here is a favorite from Kaladesh, Unlicensed Disintegration. Unlicensed Disintegration not only destroys a target creature, if we have an artifact on the field, like a mana rock or one of our artifact sack outlets, it also deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. One of my favorite semi-board wipes is Vona's Hunger. This 3-mana black spell from Rivals of Ixalan forces each opponent to sacrifice a creature. But if we have the City's Blessing, that is 10 or more permanents, they don't sacrifice 1 creature, but half of all their creatures. This is a great way to clear the board while making Kresh unbelievably large. Keeping on the quasi-board wipe train, Savage Twister deals X damage to each creature. If we can keep Kresh out of the range of this mass damage spell, a number of other creatures on the board will die, making Kresh big. Heaven to Earth is an aftermath card that allows me to deal X damage to all creatures with flying, with Heaven, while Earth deals another X damage to what's left. Sometimes though, an entire board just has to go. An opponent's gotten out of hand, or we've started to fall behind. Damnation is an iconic black board wipe that does the trick here. The last spell we have in this section is more of a utility removal spell than a specific removal spell. Primal Command is a 5-mana green sorcery that allows us to choose between 2 of the 4 modes on it. Whether it is gaining some life, popping a non-creature to the top of the owner's deck, shuffling a graveyard into a library, or tutoring up a creature, Primal Command has always come in useful. Sticking with some utility spells, Sylvan Scrying is a helpful way to either fix our mana or grab one of the important lands we'll get to in a minute. Eldritch Evolution is both a sack outlet and a creature tutor in one. By paying 3 mana and sacrificing a creature, we can then go tutor up another creature with a converted mana cost of X or less, where X was that sacrificed creature's converted mana cost, plus 2. What makes Evolution so great is that rather than having the creature go into our hand, it goes directly onto the battlefield. The last utility spell here is, in my opinion, vastly underrated in Commander. Heroic Intervention is a 2-mana instant speed, anti-board wipe, anti-removal spell, giving all of our permanents hexproof and indestructible. Cast Damnation, nobody counters it. Cast Heroic Intervention. Our board stays while our opponent's board goes. Lastly comes my favorite part about this deck, the threaten effects. As I have said, nothing is better than hitting your opponents with their own creatures, and this deck gives us 5 spells to do just that. Threaten, Act of Treason, and Traitor's Blood are all 3-mana spells that allow us to untap any creature, gain control of it, give it haste, and use it until end of turn. at which point it goes back to its owner's control. That is, unless we sacrifice it first. Hijack is another one of these 3 mana control effects, but along with being able to target creatures, it also lets us target artifacts as well. Lastly is one of the best win cons in this deck. Insurrection's 8 mana cost is well worth the price. Unlike the other 4 sorceries in this group, Insurrection does not target one creature, but gives us the ability to untap and gain control of all creatures on the board. In a multiplayer game, this spell can rack up a good number of creatures. If this doesn't win the game, a sack outlet turns it into a pseudo board wipe as well. Finally, let's take a look at the land base. In almost any multicolored deck, Command Tower is a must, giving us any of the 3 colors of our commander. Opal Palace is a nice filter land for our commander's colors as well, with the upside of also pumping our commander for each time we've cast him from the command zone. In a deck where getting damage through a defensive line is important, Scrag the Rage Pit's non-mana ability to give one of our creatures a buff while also giving it trample can help get that last point of damage through. But what if you need to get more than 1 point of damage through? Kessig Wolf Run is your alternative. The Wolf Run is a great mana sink, allowing us to buff a creature's power while giving it trample as a way of making sure combat math works for us. Trampling over our opponent's defense is great and all, but what's better is not having to worry about blockers at all. For 4 mana, Rogue's Passage allows us to give one of our creatures unblockable, allowing us to not even have to worry about our opponent's defensive creatures. Reliquary Tower lets us not have to worry about hand size either, meaning we can spend more time thinking about our aggressive and defensive plans. This deck runs a number of threaten effects and removal effects. With Mirror Pool, we can copy one of those and do it twice. The last land in this utility land suite is the one I tend to go after the most, with Sylvan Scrying and Exploration Map. High Market. With this deck having a sack outlet on a land that also gains us life, we are more likely to have a sack outlet on the board after a number of artifact and creature board wipes. One of the major mana issues with a 3-color deck is sometimes we might be light on one color or another. For this, we run a small suite of fetch lands with Wooded Foothills, Bloodstained Mire, and Windswept Heath. Commander is a game full of dual-color non-basics, and this 3-color deck is no exception. For green and black lands, we have Wooded Cemetery, which comes in untapped if we have a swamp or a forest on the field. Speaking of swamp and forest, Overgrown Tomb is a great green-black fetchable shock land, giving us the option of coming in tapped or hitting us for 2 life and getting it untapped. Next are the red-green lands. Sheltered Thicket, the Amonkhet Bicycle land, gives us a tapped fetchable land early in the game, or a good sense of card draw by cycling it late game. The next fetchable red-green land in the deck is Cinderglade. This Zendikar land enters the battlefield tapped unless we have 2 or more basics on the field. The Shock land, Stomping Ground, is the last fetchable land we have in this suite of non-basic red and green lands. If we're looking for a land that gives us red and green, we want rewards for having forest or mountains on the field. Rootbound Crag is the card we're looking for. The last red-green card we have here is the Pain land, Carpulsian Forest, giving us colorless all the time, or red or green mana if we want to take 1 damage for it. The last group of non-basic lands covers the Rakdos side of the deck. If we're looking for a black and red shock land, Blood Crypt is a card we're looking for. Don't necessarily need another tap land on the field. Canyon Slough is the black-red bicycle land for us. Smoldering Marsh is the fetchable Zendikar land we've been looking for to cover our red and black mana. If we have a swamp and a mountain in our hand, show it off, and Foreboding Ruins does not come in tap. If we got our mountains and or swamps on the field, Dragonskull Summit does not need to come in tapped either. Filter lands, in my opinion, are greatly underappreciated, and for this deck, we're running Graven Carns to filter some of our red and black mana. Finally, we come to the Manland Lava Claw Reaches. For Kresh, Reaches is an amazing card. Not only is it a mana sink creature that can survive sorcery speed board wipes, but throw all your mana into it, then sack it and pump Kresh for lethal. A deck cannot run on non-basic lands alone, and as such, the last cards on this list are the basic land. This deck runs 11 of them, 4 forests, 3 mountains, and 4 swamps. Playing this deck is fun, and it runs a 2-part game plan. The first part of that game plan is set up with a number of sacrifice outlets. This deck runs 11 sacrifice outlets in total. These effects are on almost every card type we run. We have lands and artifacts we can sacrifice creatures to. We also have creatures and spells that can help us liberate creatures from life. Each one of these sacrifice effects gives us an upside too, whether that is pumping a creature, killing another creature, gaining us life, or giving us mana, just to name a few. All of these sacrifice effects really help keep Kresh big enough to kill someone with commander damage. But sacrificing our own creatures is not always advantageous for us, which leads us to the second part of this game plan. The second part of this game plan is stealing our opponent's creatures. This and sacrificing creatures together form a strategy I like to call Snacrifice. As stealing creatures from across the board is essential to the Snacrifice game plan, this deck runs 8 threaten effects, 5 sorcery speed, and 3 attached to creatures. It's best to remember too that you do not have to steal your opponent's creatures and sacrifice it right away. Remember, a player can be killed by their own commander with commander damage if you steal it and hit them with it enough. For an overview on the deck, we see we run a total of 22 creatures and 4 enchantments. For spells, we have 9 instants and 10 sorceries. Finally, we see we have 1 planeswalker, 17 artifacts, and 36 lands. This fun and friendly Snacrifice build of Kresh the Bloodbraided scores about a 6.75 out of 10 on the EDH power scale. This Kresh deck is quite focused on the game plan, but it is just short of being totally optimized. This deck also ranks in between $350 and $400. With only a handful of cards topping over $20 and no one card more than $30, this deck can be built for about the price of a standard deck. If you are looking for an incredibly fun, interactive, and never boring commander deck that allows you to beat your opponents with their own creatures, this Snacrifice build of Kresh the Bloodbraided is the deck for you. For the complete deck list, check out the description below. Have any suggestions or a request for another deck tech? Find me on Twitter at project_blue18. And if you like what you see here, hit the like button, comment down below, and be sure to follow me for more videos. Thanks for watching Project Blue. I'm Matt, and I'll see you next time.